Thank you, Julia. Uh, by Julia, our newest employee at the chapter, who's our program and membership associate, and then Carissa Miller, who is the board president. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. We are recording this, and either the recording from tonight or the recording from tomorrow's session will be posted up on our website, hopefully by Thursday, so that you can access it and watch it again, or if you have people who weren't able to make it today, they can watch it before our legislative education and advocacy day, our social work lobby day on Monday, March 3rd. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Julia to start.
Thank you. Yes, welcome to the session. We are so excited to see you on Monday at the State House. So we wanted to take a few minutes this evening, so thank you for your time, to make sure that you feel fully prepared and are getting just as excited to see us on Monday. So here are a couple of things we'll cover this evening. We'll just tell you quickly about NASW and NASW-Indiana chapter. We'll talk a little bit about why social workers advocate. We'll go over the legislative process. We'll talk about types of advocacy. We'll touch on advocacy concerns and fears and remind you of the direct practice skills that you have to effectively advocate and overcome those concerns and fears. And we'll take a look at some of the sample bills from this session that NASW-Indiana has been following. So real quick about NASW, National Association of Social Workers. We are the largest membership organization for professional social workers in the world. There are 55 chapters of NASW, of which Indiana is one. And we want to take a moment to call out for you because there are a lot of things that a professional membership association can do for you, but one of the best ways to really get the most out of a membership is to be part of the work that they do. And so we wanted to share some of the committees because members are always invited and welcome to join us for some of the committees. And it's a great way. I mean, it just takes networking to the next level. People make friends by working together on some of these committees. So we really do want to highlight some of the opportunities there. We do have a public policy committee, which also takes leadership of planning the lead event. There's an ethics committee. We have program committees, which also include some of the affinity group programs. And then we have the political action and candidate education committee. Some places you might hear that referred to more or less as a PAC. This is our version of that. So what is the primary function of NASW or any professional membership association? It's really to promote professional development. It's to establish and maintain professional standards of practice so that there's always like an elevation of your profession, that everyone's kind of rising up to the standards. So that's kind of an important function of a professional membership association. NASW in particular works towards advancing social policies. Membership associations provide a whole host of services that are meant to make your professional life easier, protect members, provide services like insurance and career advice and those sorts of things. And then another one that I think probably most people recognize their professional associations for are being sponsors of education that allows them to earn their continuing education. If you haven't joined NASW yet, do think about it, please. There are just so many benefits of a professional association membership. is how you can stay up to date on current trends in your industry and your practice. Um, there, it is a way to collectively advocate as a community. Um, and I like that word community for your professional association because it really gives you a chance to be in your profession in community with other people who understand what you are working towards. Professional associations are fantastic for networking opportunities and career resources. In particular for NASW, there's really a kind of fantastic focus on the ethics and opportunities to receive legal guidance if needed. And then there are obviously trainings and education opportunities and services like I mentioned before, insurance, um, insurance services, training. But I will come back to really the professional network and building that is critical to you at every stage of your career. It is how you figure out, like, talking with others can be how you figure out how you want to move in your career when you're starting out, and then being able to kind of not formally but unofficially mentor people towards the end of your career and provide thought leadership into your profession through your association. That's really a big way to find meaning as you close out your career. So career span the entire way, your professional association can make a huge difference to you. So I really want to put a plug in for joining. And with that, I will actually hand us over to Carissa.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about why social workers advocate. So first, social workers represent a vast number of individuals and communities within the state and really nationally and globally, but we're going to talk about Indiana tonight. So some of us are clinical social workers. That's me. There are plenty of other social workers that are not. And whenever we're in whatever field of practice that we are within that social work umbrella, we want to make sure that we represent those that we serve really well. So the second piece is the NASW Code of Ethics. So anybody who plans to be licensed will follow the NASW Code of Ethics. And that's something that we want to use as our kind of guiding light on any kind of decisions that we need to make. We also want to make sure that we provide that professional expertise to policymakers, and we'll get there in a little bit, but we don't want to ever assume that they understand what a bill does or what impact that would have on the general population. We also want to be in that empowerment role for our clients and for our peers. So being able to lift other people up to make sure that their voices are heard. And then we want to empower ourselves as individuals, right? Remember that that's your house when we're there on Monday. And so we're there to represent our voices collectively and the voices of those that we serve. All right, so let's talk a little bit about that code of ethics and advocacy. Social work has a set of core values and those broad ethical principles. So you see them there listed on this slide. We have service, social justice, dignity and worth of the person, importance of human relationships, and integrity. So as far as the code of ethics, when you start digging down into it, in this ethical principle, we have the responsibilities to the broader society to make sure that we're promoting the general welfare of society from local to global levels. So that means that we're here to build up our social systems so that all people can live a life of equality. All right, so social and political action, it's actually built right here into our code of ethics, right? We should engage in social and political action that seeks to ensure that all people have equal access to the resources, employment, services, and opportunities that they require to meet their basic human needs and develop fully. I'm not going to read all of these verbatim for the whole thing, but we need to be there to build up those systems of equity so that people have access to the things that they need to live life to their best potential. So going on to the additional pieces of that social and political action. We want to expand choice and opportunity for all people. So what is right for me may not necessarily be what's right for everybody else. And we want to make sure that people can make their own choices that make the most sense for them. We also want to promote conditions and encourage respect for cultural and social diversity within the US and globally. Again, how I live my life is not necessarily what's right for the way that someone else needs to live their life. We want to act to prevent and eliminate domination of, exploitation of, and discrimination against any person, group, or class on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, marital status, political belief, religion, immigration status, and mental or physical ability. Any questions on the Code of Ethics and why we advocate?
And you all can raise your hand to ask questions or put questions in the chat if you have them, and we will incorporate them in as we go.
Meryl, you want to talk about how a legislative process becomes law?
I will. I just want to take one step back to, so the Code of Ethics is what directs us in kind of the work that we do and the positions that we take on things. In reality, we could probably get involved in every single bill that ever gets heard at the State House. Logistically and as far as just abilities, we just don't have that much time in our day. So we really try to focus in on those core pieces that are relevant, as well as then the other pieces where we can have impact with our partners and the other folks we work with. And that goes back to what Julia mentioned about if you're not a member, we hope you will consider joining. That really is the best way for us to bring about positive change and continue to move to achieving what we need to and making things better for ourselves and the clients that we serve.
Meryl, I'm going to pause you really quick. Someone pointed out that the chat itself is disabled. So it's the Q&A feature that you'll use
Sorry
at
about
the
that.
bottom to put your questions in. I just want to make sure that people know that. You should see it's a little chat box thing at the bottom that says Q&A, and then you can type a question in there and then we will answer it.
We will. You can also raise your hands too, I believe, and we can unmute you to ask questions. Thank you, Carissa, and thank you, Megan, for pointing that out. So some of you might have seen Schoolhouse Rocks and I'm Just a Bill. So the Indiana process is kind of the same, kind of not the same. There are some differences. In Indiana and in every state, there are times when a bill happens because of somebody's idea. I don't like that there's no traffic light, that there's only stop signs on the road, right? That could be something to, I don't know. What was this? Every year there seems to be a bill on a state bug, a state flower, a state something. So all kinds of things end up coming out as an idea. Sometimes it's one person's idea, sometimes it's a group of people, but an idea. And then it gets drafted by legislative services, and it has to make it through the entire process before all of the legislative deadlines in order to become law. And one of the things so we are currently in a long session. Odd years are long sessions in Indiana, so they run from January through basically the end of April. Short sessions run from January through about the middle to end of March. The only thing they have to accomplish in a long session is a budget. And the one thing they really don't deal with in a short session is large issues around funding and money. So we will be putting this up on the website so you can download the chart. So the process is the same on both sides. So a bill starts out with an idea to a legislator. legislative services staff are available, and they are the ones that draft it. You can end up with 4 people with the exact same idea and the exact same request. And so you can end up with 4 different bills, 4 different numbers with basically the same context, because nobody knows what anybody else has filed unless somebody tells you, or until the bill is actually filed and live. So the bills get drafted and they go to first reading, which is basically just the assignment to a committee. They get assigned to a committee. There are lots of bills that get assigned to a committee, and that's as far as they go. I believe there were over 1,200 bills filed at the beginning of this year. And I haven't gone back to count to see how many are still alive, but a lot of them died, and a lot of them died during and never even got a hearing. Once it gets assigned to a committee, you have to get a hearing. And in the hearing, the committee can make the decision to amend the bill, to hear the bill and never do anything with it, or to pass the bill just as it is. There are lots of times. So there was a bill that had been filed that had a lot of different small pieces around licensing in it, some changes. Lots of people didn't like it. Bill was up for a committee hearing, went in that morning for the committee hearing. Bill was pulled. Bill never got heard. That is the end. The language can end up someplace else, but that actual number, once it's dead in a committee or doesn't make it through the first half, that actual bill number is no longer relevant and active. So a bill makes it through committee. Again, it gets amended or passed as it is, and it goes back to the full. So we're going to start that on the Senate side. It would go back to the full Senate for a second reading, at which point all 50 senators have the opportunity to offer amendments, to discuss the bill, and to vote on the bill. So on second reading, they can amend it. They can decide that it needs to go back to committee to have some changes made. Or they can vote it down and it can die. Most times they get amended and they get passed out for second reading. Bills that tend to die on second reading is because there are still problems that they're working on and they can't get them resolved before the deadline happens. So this is their break week. Last week, Thursday was the last day for bills to pass third reading out of the House and Senate. So anything that didn't pass second reading by that deadline, which I believe was Wednesday last week, they're dead. They're gone. Again, the content can end up in another bill, but the actual bill number is dead. After second reading, it goes to third reading, and the same thing happens where they can amend it. It takes a larger vote in order to get it to amend in third reading. It's much harder. So it doesn't happen very often. And again, it can pass or get defeated. There are a couple of really good bills that died on third reading last week. There are a number of good bills that didn't make it through second reading. There are also a number of not so great bills that ended up dying in this process last week. So it can be good or bad. It's just the process. Once that's done, everything moves and it goes through the second house. So if you start in the Senate, you finish in the House. If you start in the House, you finish in the Senate. The exact same steps. So you get assigned to a committee. There's a committee hearing where the committee members vote. And again, they can amend it or make changes or pass it as it is. Then you go through second and third readings again with being able to amend it. The one time that you as a constituent can actually speak publicly is in a committee. After a committee hearing, you can, and before a committee hearing, you can always talk to your senator or representative and have those conversations and ask them to do something or not do something. You can also talk to them while they're on the floor of either the House or the Senate. But say a bill's made it through, so it made it through first the Senate and it's made it through the House, and there were no changes between the Senate and the House. The bill then basically goes back to the Senate. they kind of stamp it and it would go to the governor's office, where the governor can either sign a bill, veto a bill, or it can become law without signature. If there's a change in a bill between when it passed the Senate and when it passes the House, so different versions from both sides, there ends up having to be a decision made. So if a Senate bill gets changed in the House, the person in the Senate can decide that they're okay with the changes and accept the changes, or they can reject the changes, at which point the bill goes to a conference committee. And you have equal numbers of members from the Senate and the House, Democrats and Republicans, who sit down and are to negotiate an agreement on all sides. There are opportunities for public input, but they're not as, you have to be you need to know what's going on to be able to be aware so that you can have a say. Because sometimes they'll go in and have an initial meeting, and then they'll walk out and make some decisions and come back and make their decisions, and nobody really knows what happened. We could argue whether that's okay or not, but that is the way it is. And so, which is part of the reason why we're there trying to make sure we know what's going on. And there's a whole group of people who we work with at the State House to keep track of things when they get to conference committee time. So, the next couple of slides, these again will be in the documents that are up on the website, but it just walks you through everything that I just explained. If a bill changes again in the second chamber, there has to be agreement. When a bill goes to the governor can sign the bill or veto the bill. If on the 8th day he hasn't signed it or vetoed it, then it becomes law without signature. There are theories about why governors wouldn't want to sign a bill but would let it become law. Currently, there is a supermajority in both the House and the Senate of Republicans. And so it would be easy for them to override a veto. So if the governor vetoes a bill, it just takes a constitutional majority of both houses to override that veto. So there don't tend to be that many vetoes, but again, it is a mechanism that the governor can have to show that he doesn't like something that's happening. Most bills will become effective either on July 1st of the year they're enacted, unless there's a different effective date. And sometimes there are multiple effective dates included in legislation. So that a part of it starts on this date and a part of it starts in another year. And it just kind of depends on what they're trying to do. So the questions of like, who do you talk to? When can you talk to them? How can you get involved in the process? Really and truly, the easiest, best way for you to get involved in the process and have an impact into what becomes law is to vote and to make sure that we get the right people in office who will listen and be part of the solutions and not try and do things that we may not want them to do. But again, just making sure that you're voting, and then making sure that you know who your legislator is and that they know who you are and that you have a relationship with them. And so you can talk to your legislator. You can talk to a bill author. You can talk to a committee chair, and you can talk to committee members to make a difference in legislation and have an impact on things. If you have an issue with a bill, it really is common courtesy to try and talk to the bill author and the committee chair to let them know that you have issues before the hearing. Nobody really likes being surprised when somebody comes in and says, I don't like this. So it is really important just to be respectful. Whether you agree with people or not, it's always important to be respectful of their opinions, because that's part of what makes us the country we are, is that we don't always have to agree on everything. So again, in that committee hearing, you can also have some impact between second and third readings by speaking to your own legislator and other members um, of the House or Senate. So talking to them about what you like, what you don't like, talking to your friends. If you have, if you have a friend who lives in another district, to ask them to carry the same message or a similar message to their legislator. The more people who call in with issues or concerns, the bigger impact we can have on things. Honestly, like I said, there was this bill. It impacted, I don't know, I think there were like 10 or 12 professions in the bill. And everybody called in and said nobody liked it. And the bill never got heard and we didn't have to worry about arguing. So just thinking about those things of who do you know who would also be happy to make a phone call or have a conversation? And I will tell you honestly that half the time then when you make a call, you will not actually be talking to your elected official. You will be leaving a message with somebody. And it's very simple and easy to do. When bills cross over, so in the second half, using the same process, and again, talking to the sponsors of the bill when it moves, talking to so if a bill starts in the Senate, talking to your then representative when it moves over to the House, being very clear and concise with your message. And I think the most important thing to remember is, do you have a story of how it's going to impact you? So, I think by now everybody's figured out that nobody really has any control over the price of eggs because there's a bird flu that's increasing prices, right? That's decreasing the amount of birds that are out there to produce eggs. And all right, so having a personal story about what the impact of egg prices on you probably wouldn't change anything that's happened. But potentially telling a story about something else, about the stop sign down the street from your house, about your kids in school and how having enough school social workers in your school could be really helpful for all the kids and how it's helped your kid. The story about how your friend who was struggling with homelessness was able to get help through these services, telling those stories can really make a difference. It's much more powerful than me standing up and saying there are 50, there are 100, right? It makes a difference, but having people actually tell their personal stories to elected officials can really make a difference, and can help them understand the issue from a different perspective. So are there any questions? I don't think there are. Okay. So when we think about advocacy, one of the things to think about is that advocacy can be anything from talking to your elected official to boycotting a product, right? To getting people to vote, getting people registered to vote, helping your clients understand what's going on, not telling people who to vote for, but helping them understand how important their vote is, how important their voice is. Helping legislators understand what's going on. We were in a meeting earlier today talking about a bunch of federal programs and kind of what's going on with them. And, if people don't understand that SNAP or food stamps also helps farmers, it also helps people put food on their table, but it also helps grocery stores and convenience stores and other places that accept food stamps keep their doors open. And there's an impact from the top to the bottom on all of these things. And so helping people understand that impact and how important it is to your local communities. Medicaid, health insurance, the Affordable Care Act, all support local health care, especially in rural communities, right? We don't have those things. We don't have the same resources. So how do we help people understand? You can have meetings. If you run or work in an environment where you're providing services to families, to children, you're doing addiction work, substance use disorder stuff, inviting elected officials in to come and see and tour your place of business, with permission of your clients, not revealing anybody's private information, but thinking about what does that look like, right? If you run a food pantry, inviting them to come in and see your food pantry and see what it takes to run a food pantry. Lots of people don't understand. And sometimes that educational piece can be a really big component. Writing letters, making phone calls. Okay, so writing letters, I need to change that someday to emails too, but letter or email, it's all the same thing. Boycotts can be very effective, but also just making sure, again, that you know who your legislator is and that you're part of that conversation. And being part of your membership association can help, because we then also we'll have more resources to be able to do more of that work and try and help send those messages. Sorry about that. It's been a rough year for being sick, I know. So other activities that you can do. Again, you can work with the legislator to write or introduce a bill. There are a number of legislators who we work with routinely who will call us and ask us what we think about different ideas, different concepts, so that they can make sure they get it right or as close to right as they can when they file things. Scheduling meetings to discuss your concerns. Again, that may not be that effective during session, but the rest of the year, over the summer, in the fall, when you have the time and they have the time, when you run into them, I run into my personal state rep at the bank and at the grocery store regularly because we live in the same neighborhood. And he knows me and he doesn't run the other way. We actually have nice conversations about things. But they're human just like all of us. And so taking those opportunities to get to know them outside of just calling them and saying, I want you to do this. I don't want you to do that. I like this. I didn't like that, right? Getting to know them. You can provide testimony. There are committees where you have to sign up to be able to testify. And yes, you can, if you ever want to, you can actually watch the committee hearings online. You cannot testify virtually, but you can watch virtually. But you can also submit testimony in writing if you can't make it. And you can send it to the committee chair and ask that it be shared with the committee members. So you can also create fact sheets and talking points and share them with your peers and ask your peers and your colleagues to share them out, your community members. Speaking to other folks who are working on similar issues, and then making sure that whatever your message is, that it's really clear and concise, and that you've got a specific request in that. So I really like that you were doing this piece, but we'd like to change this, right? Which is how a lot of our testimony goes on things, which is we like all of these things, but could we change this little piece over here? Sometimes we win and sometimes we lose, but it's all about working and trying to make things better. The other thing to remember is that while this is a description of how to do things at the State House, the same thing works in your local community and nationally. So your local county councils, your township boards, your school boards, all of these things can work the exact same way. You can have the same kind of impact at the local level. So it's not just about federal or state legislation. When you think about advocacy, a lot of people, including me sometimes, I will be completely honest, that I walk into the State House at times and think, I have a lot of anxiety about this, depending on what the bill is and what the committee is. a number of years ago, there was a couple of very there were a lot of people at the State House. There were hundreds and hundreds of people at the State House to testify for and against a couple of bills. I got called first to go testify. And I was just like, I've never been first. In the 12 plus years I've been doing this, I have never been called first to testify on a bill. That wasn't something we had asked somebody to carry for us. Yeah, I was pretty nervous when I walked up, but it's still, I made it through. I survived. And I think that's the thing to remember is that we have a lot of knowledge. We just have to take a deep breath and just keep moving, and not let our fears take over and stop us from doing things. So just because you don't necessarily understand the whole legislative process doesn't mean that you can't have an impact, right? Ask somebody. I can guarantee you that somebody will be able to answer your question. If you don't know everything about the bill or the issue, then just don't answer the question. So I told you that I was the first called, and they made changes there was an amendment to the bill. I hadn't heard everything that was changed. And somebody asked me a question about a part that was changed. And I said, I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of that. Could you please explain to me what the changes were? They didn't want to do it. And I was like, I can't answer the question because I don't, but I'm happy to talk with you about that later. After the hearing, that legislator found me and we had a long conversation, and we still didn't agree, but it wasn't the end of the world that I couldn't answer that one question, right? While things can feel very fraught sometimes when you're there and a little hostile, it really isn't. It is a public space. I have never not felt safe there. And people may get a little heated, but it's because we're all passionate about the work that we're doing. So again, just thinking about how can you be best prepared for walking in so that you can deal with the things. So like that general public speaking anxiety. I say this to everybody and I say it to myself every time I get up to a podium to testify on something is take a deep breath, take one more deep breath, and then start. And just remember to say your name, which I've forgotten in the past to say who I am and who I'm representing. Because I just forgot, and I got like a minute in and somebody kind of gave me the look and I was like, whoops, sorry, my name is, and I said my name and everybody just kind of chuckled and I kept going and it was fine. And we still got what we needed to get. So just remember that everybody's human and we all make mistakes. And everything will be okay. Even if you don't get what you really want and people don't actually hear everything that you're saying, you've still made the point, and that's what's important.
I've got a question in the chat.
Yeah,
or
I
in the Q&A.
see that.
Okay.
So for submitting testimony in writing, again, sending a letter in. You can send a letter in. There are ways. I would not encourage you to sign up. You can sign up online. You have to sign up if you're going to testify. So if you're going into committee, there will be pieces of paper. There will be, I believe they're iPads in the hallway. You have to sign up and say whether you're for or against or neutral on a bill. There are usually pieces of paper, half pieces of paper that you also can fill out. You have to fill those out. You can fill them out as of 12:01 a.m. of the day that your committee meets. All of the instructions on what you are to do for that committee is on that committee page. So some of the committees will allow you to bring in documents. Other committees require you to submit everything electronically and will not let you bring in any papers without permission. If your legislator is on that committee, you can ask them if they would be happy to share your written testimony with other members of the committee. And so it's really just about figuring out the best way to get it to the right person who can then make sure that the members of the committee have it. When we testified for Senate Bill 163, which was the Interstate Compact Bill, a couple years ago when we did, more than a couple years ago, when we did the diagnosis bill. We have always gotten people to provide written testimony to us, and then we create a packet of materials that include individual testimony, individual letters of support, and we submit all of that together. But again, all you need to do is send a letter in, an email, and if you can't make it, you can't make it. And the reality is lots of people can't make it. So sending that email in can be really powerful. And getting 10 of your friends can actually make a difference and change somebody's mind. One of the really important things to remember as social workers is that your direct practice skills can be used when you're doing public policy and advocacy work, right? So we learn how to use engagement skills to build relationships with our clients. You can use similar skills to build relationships with your legislators. Even if you don't agree with them, even if you are complete polar opposites on every issue, you can still build a relationship with them so that there is some mutual respect and they will listen. And I'm always amazed at the people who I think will never listen, who will come up and say, hey, so I heard you said this in testimony that I had somebody one day, there was a bill and I said, this could potentially impact a social worker's ability to meet with a student in a school. And the question was, there are social workers in schools? And I said, well, yes, there are actually. And I really didn't want to get in the big debate about should there, shouldn't there. I just answered the question. And later, that same legislator, who has done a lot of things that we do not agree with at all, came up to me. She actually found me and she said, so what do I need to do to make sure that that doesn't impact a social worker's ability to do their job? And I said, well, could we carve that piece out in the bill so that it says, except for these things, there's still that protection of, client privilege isn't the right word, but that you still have that HIPAA compliance, you still have that ability to see that child. And she's like, well, yeah, let me look into it. And about a week and a half later, she came up to me and actually, again, found me at the State House and said, hey, so does this work? And it worked. Now, it didn't fix everything in the bill that we wanted to fix, but it did fix that piece. So again, because I gave her the opportunity, because we were able to build some of that relationship piece, we were able to get at least a little bit better of a bill, so it wasn't horrible. Again, around active listening, trying to understand different perspectives. I am never going to convince somebody if they really believe in something that I'm right and they're wrong. So how do we have that conversation where I try to understand where they're coming from and how can we work with them and how can we work together? Using your assessment skills, again, problem solving and negotiation. And the biggest piece of all of this really is around networking and collaborating and trying to figure out how do we take those baby steps to be in a better place. And we don't always get everything we want, but we can make things better. And that's really what it's about. So a few things to not do. So when you're talking to a legislator, don't ever assume their knowledge of the bill. Honestly, when that legislator said to me, there are social workers in schools, I think if I hadn't been in the front of a very crowded room testifying, I probably would have said something I shouldn't have said. But I just was like, yes, there are, right? Realizing that clearly this person, and then later I realized that she homeschools her kids. And doesn't have a problem with public education, just has made the decision not to. So why would she know what's going on in a school? Like, never would have crossed her mind. Not going in with a hostile attitude, not thinking that everybody's your enemy. It's hard. It's really hard sometimes to not take things personally that happen, but not really. You just need to take a deep breath and remember that everybody's got an end goal, and how do we get to a better place? You don't ever want to make a threat or an accusation, because that's just not smart. It's really, I know I said earlier that there's a supermajority of Republicans, which means they can override a veto. I would say the same thing if there was a supermajority of Democrats. None of that is good. It only helps. It doesn't help any of us, because what it shows is that we only have one party really represented, one group of people, and the whole state isn't represented. But walking into somebody and saying, well, you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, and so I don't like you, doesn't do us any good. Never overstate what you know or guess on things. I had somebody ask me once about, did I know how many open social work positions there were in the state? And I said, no. And he said, well, you know how many licensed social workers there are in the state? And I said, yes, Representative, because I looked it up last night to make sure I had the right number. But because I know how many licensed social workers there are in the state doesn't mean I know how many open positions are. You'd have to ask employers. And I'm sure somebody has that information, but I don't, right? I could have easily made up a number. I didn't, because I would have been found out, because I had nothing to back it up with. But don't ever make a guess at something if you don't know. It's better just to say, I don't know. Again, don't promise something that you can't provide. So if you promise somebody or say that you will bring them more information, make sure you do it. You really don't want to get into moral debates with people, because it doesn't do any of us any good. You don't want to reinforce stereotypes about things, and you want to make sure that you are respectful of their time. They are an elected official. That doesn't make them like special in the sense of that they should be treated differently, but you want to be respected. They need to be respected too. It needs to be a mutual relationship. So briefly, just to, there are lots of polarizing and partisan issues. It seems to get more and more every year. The really important thing to think about is that for NASW, we look at these through the lens of the Code of Ethics and Social Work Speaks, right? So the Code of Ethics says we're supposed to meet our clients where they are. We're supposed to provide them support, which means that if they believe something and that's what they want, unless it's going to harm them or somebody else, right? We need to help them figure out how to move. Any law that says that we're restricting choice goes against the Code of Ethics. Whether we personally believe it or not is not the issue. It's for our clients. And so thinking about those things, and thinking about how to deal with it. And remembering that as social workers, you can believe whatever you want in your personal life, but as a professional social worker, you need to uphold the Code of Ethics, which means you need to meet your clients where they are. You need to make sure that you're following those pieces. And where you can't, you need to make sure that you have an option so that your client can get the best services they need. The other thing to think about is, what do you want to accomplish? I mentioned earlier about a legislator who found me and said, like, so what do we do to help social workers in schools be able to do this? And my first answer was, like, could we just get rid of the whole bill, which wasn't going to happen. It was a part of a parental rights move, which are not a bad thing, but it was about, anyways, making sure that nobody could do anything without parents knowing about every single thing, including things that you might not want to tell a parent right away. You might want to give your client a few days to figure out how to talk to the parent about those issues, right? So think about, what do you want to accomplish? I wanted to accomplish was killing that bill completely. That wasn't an option. So what's the next best step? How do I make a carve out so that we can still do what we need to do and not be forced to break confidentiality with a young adult before they're ready to have that conversation with the parent, or put them into an unsafe situation, right? Remembering that you need to think about what the goal is and how do you make that argument without creating a really divisive relationship. Again, at this point in time, there are lots of things that are happening that go against the NASW Code of Ethics. We are trying really hard to figure out how to work around those issues and carve those pieces out. But we also need to do it in a manner that allows us to continue to build those relationships and help people see why. It's not just because we're a bunch of social workers. It's because these are important values and goals of the profession and of where we're going. So sometimes you have to accept less than you thought you wanted to when you walked in the door. But are you making positive progress? And again, for every one person, that one legislator who a couple years ago was like, I didn't know social workers were in schools. She now will actually ask me for my opinion on things. Now, it doesn't mean that she listens to everything I say, but we actually can talk about some of this stuff where we wouldn't have if I hadn't given her the opportunity and hadn't been honest with her. So, so as you think about legislation, just remember that even if you're a student, you're still an expert. You still probably know more than legislators do, especially about social work things. So affirming your positive intentions, finding common ground, building relationships, and trying to address some of those stereotypes and misconceptions that people have about the work that we do. You know, that everybody who's homeless is homeless because they just don't want to have a job or whatever that belief is. And offer your assistance where you can so that you can meet with your legislator, have those relationships and have those discussions when it's not under the gun, when it's not time, when you have more time to actually have those conversations and try and do some of the education. We are, I am going to run out of time. So I'm going to jump through this really quick and then we'll open up for any other questions. But our public policy agenda is on our website. It is the document that guides what we do as a chapter. We have been working on advocacy for as long as NASW-Indiana has been around. We've helped with creating all of the licensing laws. And we also have worked, I've been here almost 8 years, and there hasn't been a year that somebody hasn't tried to figure out a way to let anybody call themselves a social worker. There hasn't been an attempt to make it easy for people who don't have the educational background to be able to, in some form or fashion, do some of the work that should only be for people who have the degrees and the knowledge. So our areas of focus are looking at how we advocate on behalf of social workers and the clients we serve, right? So proactive solutions to human service issues, supporting policies that strengthen children and families, encouraging and supporting civil rights, and then advocating for accessible, high quality, affordable healthcare service, mental health services, addictions, treatments, and other related services. And again, all of these are on our website, so you can grab them and look at them and read them. We work in conjunction with a number of other groups and associations around the state. We're a member of a couple of coalitions. So we do a lot of work with other folks where they may take the main position and we are there as backup to support them in the positions from a social work perspective. These are just some of the bills. We did have Senator Kreider file the social work licensure compact. We got stuck again this year in appropriations because there is a concern that it's going to cost too much money. We are currently working on a plan B to see if I can get this resurrected and we'll be able to address better, I guess, their concerns around the cost. There is this belief that if we allow and join a social work licensing compact, that every social worker will come to Indiana and bill Medicaid, which I don't think will happen, but that's part of the concern. So we're working on a couple of issues. I don't know if it'll work or not. We're going to try. There is an eviction bill that changed at the last little bit. Still has some good things, and there's a group that we are part of that is working to get some of the really good pieces of that bill put back in on the House side so that it actually does provide some protections on evictions. There's also Senate Bill 497, which is a tax credit for newborn children, which is a new idea and a really nice idea. This is just a handful of not so great bills. The Senate Bill 201, which was closed primary elections, I believe died. There are a number of election bills. So there was one to decrease the amount of time you would have for early voting to 14 days. There was another one that was going to require school boards to declare a party, which is a whole bunch of other issues. House Bill 1662 was going to criminalize homelessness so that if you were camping on a public property or on a sidewalk, you could be arrested. You would be arrested was that died. And then 1041 was heard 2 or 3 years ago and passed and made it so that trans girls could not participate in girls' sports. And this would then put that limit to college and higher ed programs. And it also passed out of committee. So that is what I know. There are a ton of other bills. We are working on some fact sheets that should be up. They now that I'm healthy again, they will be up soon. By the end of the week, they will be up on our website. So you can look at them and we'll have more alerts as things kind of move through the second half of the session. There will be more alerts that you can view through our website. If you don't know where to go, the Indiana iga.in.gov is the General Assembly website. You can read bills, look at amendments. You can find out who your legislator is. You can find committees, calendars, committee meetings. You can watch live webcasts. You can watch recorded sessions. You can go back and find the session where I forgot to say my name and watch that recording if you want. I don't remember what year it is, but you can watch, previous years. You can do all kinds of things. It's a great resource. And then just a couple other resources. We do have an advocacy action center on national. The NASW National also has an advocacy center. If you're interested in looking for information, those websites are all available. And then I forgot, I have the PDF of this session on my computer, but since I'm sharing my screen, I cannot drop it in the chat. But we will have it up on the website tomorrow so that you can download it from our website, which is the NASWIN.org. Unless, thank you, Julia. Unless I was getting ready to say, unless Julia has a link and can put it in the chat, then you all can have it that way.
And Danielle has a question, Beryl.
I need to open up that one. There you go. All right. Danielle, you are unmuted, so if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I just very quickly, is there a place to find, so like I know that the language in legislative bills is very specific, like shall versus may. Is there a website that explains that, or like a resource we could find?
So there is some information on, I don't know if I can make this work or not. Hold
I'm
on.
also happy to like email this specifically to you.
Yeah, I don't know if I can
It's a very specific student question. So
yeah, there's so on the Julia, I don't know if you can find the link, but there's a handout, a resource page on our resource packet that has a bunch of definitions of terms. But there is on the IGA website, there is a there is a, hold on a second. Let me see if I can do this. I know we're out of time. So those of you who came and need to leave, thank you all for coming. If you want to hold on for a second, I will share my screen one more time. There we go. So there is, back here, you can find the rules for administrative drafting rules.
Okay.
Right? And so you can find all kinds of things back in here. You can actually find the most current section of code here. So you can click on it and you can, so if some place references a part of code and you don't know what it means, you just type it in right here. Title,
Mhm.
it's 25237, whatever it is, right? You can just type it in and it will actually find it for you. And so you can actually see what it's referring to, which can be really helpful. The easiest way, whoops, the easiest way is to read through the bill and then see who's working on it and seeing if you can find information through their website. So like Senate Bill 2 is a Medicaid bill. It's going to do all kinds of things to Medicaid. I don't know that any of it's good, honestly. We've not, there are a lot of other people that are much more expertise on Medicaid than me that are taking the lead on it. But like Hoosier Action has a whole bunch of information available. So I would see if you can figure out who's interested in it, who's working on it, and finding their websites, because they'll help you. They should have resources that can help you understand what the bill will do.
Okay.
So sometimes it's kind of it's like a little treasure hunt on the internet to try and find things. And sometimes if you go back and listen to the hearing, you can also learn things. And I know that that takes time, so I'm not going to say that that's the easy part. But there are days when I will go back and listen to a hearing for a second or third time because I still know I'm missing something in it.
Okay.
Good
Thank
question.
you.
You're welcome. Are there other questions or? All right. Sorry about the coughing. Thank you all for joining us and being part of tonight. For those of you who didn't make it Friday, this is why I didn't do this on Friday and why we postponed to tonight and tomorrow. So thank you all for coming and for joining us. And we hope that, I know some of you are coming on Monday. I'm really excited to see everybody on Monday for our 26th annual Lead at the State House. It will be a great, fun day as they kick off the second half of this session. So thank you all very much.